The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Game Podcast Network is brought to you by Market Fantasy. Sign up with the promo code SGPN. Get a $1,000 bonus credit. We're also about to Edge Boost. Get $70 per month cash rewards by using the Edge Boost card, by using the link to sign up, edgeboost.bet, with the promo code SGPN. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Game Podcast here on the Sports Game Podcast Network. It is currently Sunday night, March 30th, roughly 8 p.m. Eastern Time on the, once again, East Coast. I'm your host, always, Scott Reichel, once again, going solo for this pod. Time to get into the preview of the three events that we're going to have over the next week. Now, I do want to point out, normally we do an episode after the picks from the previous episode conclude. However, there's been a bunch of rain in Miami today. So because of that, the final in the men's side between Djokovic and Mensik has not happened yet. Got tired of waiting, though. Didn't want to record this at about midnight when you have, once again, tournaments starting up at like 4 a.m. tomorrow. So decided to, once again, basically just move forward. And we're going to, of course, have a recap of the Lock and Dog plays from the last episode, 2 episodes from now. But either way, point is we do have a couple tournaments to get into. Hopefully, the Lock and Dog picks from the previous episode end up cashing, but they have not actually happened yet. So either way, going to move on into Bucharest, Houston, and Marrakech, which means it's officially time for the clay slate of the season, as we do have 2 separate tournaments in Europe and Houston, and they're all going to be clay. So we're going to get into each of those tournaments in a second. Do want to point out, though, we do have outrights, but no quarter odds. So apologies there, but we got to deal with what we have. So point is, we're going to get into each of those events in a second. Before into that, though, do want to quick reminder once again that you can support the show. Like, subscribe, on YouTube, reminder. Show's also available on Spotify or Apple. So you want to listen to the podcast audio only, that's fine too. Check it out on SGPN Tennis Gambling Podcasts on Spotify and Apple. But don't forget to leave a rating and a review. And if you are new to the podcast on YouTube, first of all, welcome. Hopefully enjoy the show. And a reminder, don't forget to like, subscribe to help the show grow. Plus, a reminder to check out the actual merch store on the SGPN website. We've autographed Tennis Gambling Podcast merch with sweatshirts, t-shirts, and mugs, different colors, high quality, and very affordable. Recommend getting yourself something there. And a reminder for the actual SGPN listeners out there, don't forget to sign up for the Discord server completely free, because why would you pay for some touts Discord where you can get access to SGPN's Discord completely free? Hang out with the SGPN community, breaking down all the DGen action. Head over to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/Discord for, once again, access to the free Discord server. Anyway, nothing to recap from the last episode because we do have no matches to recap because the Djokovic-Mensik match has not started yet. So we're going to move straight forward into the events taking place over the next week. So starting off with the first event, going to go in chronological order. First event starting at 4 a.m. on Monday. You have Bucharest in Romania. So looking at the recent winners here, really not much of a, I'd say, there's really not much to look at a recent history, but I'm still going to break it down. Last year, you saw Fucsovics beat Navone in the final. Before that, you saw Verdasco beat Apuy as the previous winner in 2016. So as you can tell, the event was on hiatus, and then they brought it back last year. So not really much to talk about in terms of recent history, but Fucsovics is the most recent winner. Now, for the outright odds here for the event, you have Baez as the favorite at 5-1. You have De Gier at 6-1. You have Martinez at 9-1. Navone at 10-1. You have Jari at 11-1. Fucsovics defending champion at 11-1. Caboli at 14-1. Ugo Carabelli at 14-1. Dzanchop at 16-1. Comasagna at 18-1. Yovorenko at 20-1, Agut at 20-1, Shevchenko at 20-1, Basavaretti at 22-1, Lajovic at 22-1, Yubu at 28-1, DeZumer at 28-1, Sang at 28-1. You kind of get the point, but if you want to go for a long shot veteran, you do have Gasquet there at the weigh end at 40-1. So once again, no history to really talk about for the event, but I do want to at least remind everyone that the clay slate's officially here. So we're going to see a bunch of events that could be wide open if you find the right long shot and you get the draw opening up. We know clay tennis can be very unpredictable and very, very, I'd say, grueling in terms of the rallies themselves. They can be very exhausting. So you might end up seeing some guys who are just great at rallying find a groove and hit themselves a great opportunity, or find themselves a great opportunity to go on a dream run. So keep that in mind. For the favorites here for Baez, I'll start off with him because we know that he was very good in the clay slate a couple of weeks ago, but he does have a very good draw as well. Does have a bye, then Diallo or Sang in the second round. Then he has potentially Comasagna, Agut, or Bu. Probably Comasagna, who he's beaten before the season. So I think Baez has a pretty decent spot. His half of the draw can be a bit difficult, though, as the second quarter is really insane. You have Jari, Lajovic, O'Connell, Nardi, Fucsovics, De Gier, and Navone. So you can have a potential rematch of the final last year in the second round, But Navone Degir in the first round is kind of wild. And I think Fucsovics and Navone or Degir in the second round is also pretty crazy. And we know Lajovic can be dangerous on clay against Jari as well. So that whole quarter is kind of nuts, and I do expect them to kill each other in this one. So for futures, even though I did like the opportunity that Fucsovics and Navone and Degir had, I have to pass on all of them because that quarter is just too difficult to actually predict. So I'd rather go elsewhere where I think there's going to be a more manageable opportunity for some guys to find good matchups to advance far into the draw. Now, I do think based on the actual outrights, though, I have to start off with the favorite. I am going to go with Baez at 5-1. I kind of have to. He's the best clay player in the field by a decent margin, and I think you should look sharp in this event. Baez, we know, can really go on any phenomenal run on clay, and no one would be surprised. We know that he's not good on hard court at all, but he's a clay specialist at this point, so I do think he'll look sharper on the clay here in Romania. Give me Baez here at around 5-1 as the first choice. Now, moving on, said before, I am going to skip over Degir and Navone because I didn't like the actual quarter that they are in. Same thing with Jari and Fucsovics, which is kind of wild because 4 of the lowest 6 odds, so 4 of the 6 favorites, are in the same quarter, which is kind of nuts, so I'm going to toss all of them out. I don't see any value on that. Give me Baez instead at 5-1. Now, that's going to open up some opportunities for some other guys going to the bottom half of the bracket. Said before, you have that many high-quality clay guys in the top half. The bottom half is a lot easier as you have the Martinez section, which is basically a bye. Then he has a Wawrinka, I believe, in the second round. Then he has what could be Basavaretti, maybe DeZumer, so we'll see, but a pretty decent draw there for Martinez. And then the third quarter has Ugo Carabelli, Caboli, you have Dzanshulp, you have Gasquet in there too. So Caboli's been a mess so far this season, and Ugo Carabelli has been pretty good on clay. Never really been a great ATP player, but did make the semis of a clay event in the ATP level a couple weeks ago. So we'll see what happens, but the bottom half is definitely easier than the top half. So I am going to go with a couple of bottom half guys. I am going to go with Martinez at 10-1. I think even if Martinez isn't necessarily good enough to beat some guys in the top half in a potential final matchup, at least I like the overall draw that he has. Wawrinka is not that great at this stage in his career, and we saw Martinez beat Wawrinka, I believe. I'm trying to think. I think he beat him on clay, if I'm not mistaken, in their head-to-head history. But with the overall quarter that Martinez has, pretty manageable, and you're looking at Morozin, who was supposed to be in that quarter as well, and he dropped out. He ended up having an ankle issue, so you're looking at an even weaker quarter than what was anticipated for Martinez, which is definitely good for him. I'll go with him for the draw itself. Give me Martinez at 10-1, who we know is also a clay specialist. Now, I am going to go to a bit of a longer shot here in the top half of the draw. Might be dangerous, but I just like his overall game, and I do like how he pushed Baez to the brink on clay a couple weeks ago. I'm going to go with Comesaña at 18-1. He's been a solid clay player on the challenger circuit, but his overall quarter is manageable. He does have Baez in a potential matchup there in the quarterfinals, but he does have a qualifier in the first round, then either Bu or Agut. At this stage in Agut's career, I'm not really scared, and Bu's not really known for being a clay guy. I think Comesaña should advance to the quarters, and I think that he can beat Baez in theory. Did lose in a final set breaker against Baez in the last meeting earlier this year, so I do think Comesaña has the game to make it interesting, and 18-1 is a good price for a guy that I think is actually very talented. We saw him make a good run in Wimbledon last year. We saw him make a good run in the clay slate earlier this year. Think he's a solid player. I like 18-1. I know the draw can be difficult, but if Baez does slip up to a guy who he almost lost to in the previous meeting, I think 18-1 is worth something. So give me Comesaña at 18-1. And last but not least, give me the super long shot. Give me DeZumer at 28-1. Crazy price. I saw most books had like 16-1, but DraftKings at 28-1. I feel like they have not fully accounted for the draw change with the withdrawal from once again, the main competition in his quarter as Morozin dropped out. So I do think you're looking at a pretty reasonable quarter here. DeZumer's quietly been good so far this year. We saw him look pretty sharp on clay a couple weeks ago, and I think that 28-1 is, objectively speaking, a solid price for a guy in the bottom half of the draw, which is a pretty solid, I'd say, quarter in particular, and he's been in good form. I think DeZumer at 28-1 is worth something. I think that there is some value in that actual I'd say draw in the bottom half. Would I take DeZumer to beat Baez or any of those guys? Probably not. But if you want to give me a path to a final that's reasonable at 28-1 in a clay tournament, we know random things can happen in the European clay slate. Give me DeZumer at 28-1 as my long shot for Bucharest. Now, I see a couple people in the comment section. I see D. John's excited for, once again, tennis in Houston. Nick stopping by, talking about clay. Yeah, let's make some money. Looking forward to it. In a way, I'm kind of sad hardcourt season ended because we had the insane locker run on hardcourt. But either way, point is it comes and goes. So hopefully we'll end up keeping it rolling here during the clay season. Leonard stopping by. Things going well. Recorded, actually, the baseball episode about an hour or two ago. So now I'm back here with tennis. And Johnson, enjoying my place here for tennis. Same thing with Paris. Nice to see you too. Welcome back. So anyway, once again, my outright picks here for Bucharest. We're going to go with Baez at 5-1, Martinez at 10-1, Comasagna at 18-1, and for the long shot odds, give me DeZumer at 28-1. Now, before we get into the breakdown of the next tournament, I want to remind once again that we are brought to you by our sponsor, EdgeBoost, because they have a great EdgeBoost Visa debit card. You could use the card to avoid being hassled at the sportsbook or DFS site. If you have your card denied, that will not happen with the card. You can also earn cash rewards, $70 per month in cash rewards by using the EdgeBoost card. Your money's also saved cards. That's insured, and best part, no credit checks, fully free. Sign up today, though, for the card with the link edgeboost.bet with the promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by MyBookie. MyBookie is the place to bet in every sport. They have props in every game. They also give customers a ton of locations, and best part, there are a ton of ways to easily deposit, and you could use crypto to deposit and get lightning fast payouts. And a reminder, you could also head to mybookie.ag with the promo code SGPN, so you get a 100% deposit match up to 1K. That's mybookie.ag, promo code SGPN. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Game Podcast. Finished breaking down the outrights for Bucharest, and now it's time to keep it rolling for the remainder of the slate. We do have two other clay events to talk about. Going to move on into Marrakech, actually, for the next one. So for this one, unfortunately, unlike last year, we actually have to handicap these matches because Berrettini is not here. And last year, you might remember, we just backed Berrettini blindly for about 2 straight weeks, and he did not drop a set. So Berrettini dominated. He was the recent winner, as he did end up beating Baena in straight sets in the final. Baena did beat Muller the year prior, and Goffin did beat Mulcahy the previous iteration of the event. So unfortunately for us, Berrettini is not here to defend his title after not dropping a set in basically 2 straight weeks of clay season tennis. So we do have to actually try to break down some of these matches. I know, what a bummer. Anyway, moving on to the actual outright picks here and the outright odds for Marrakech. Starting off with the favorite, you have Borges at 6-1. He's a co-favorite with Griekspoor at 6-1. You have Sonego at 650. You have Muller at 8-1. Busta is at 9-1. Darderis at 10-1. You have Munar at 10-1. You have Baena as the once again defending runner-up and former champion at 14-1. You have Kotov at 16-1. You have De Jong at 16-1. Bellucci at 18-1. Altmaier at 18-1. Delian at 20-1. Fognini, who's still around, at 28-1. And you kind of get the point. So, looking at the actual favorites here. For Borges, I wasn't interested. To be honest, I just didn't think that he was worthy of being 6-1. The draw's okay. The problem is he has the same potential, say, collision course with Baena. And Baena's been great here. Baena's made the final in 2 straight years. So I understand Borges is a solid up-and-coming player who's been in the top 50 recently. But I do think Borges is really not worth being a 6-1 favorite, at least compared to Griekspoor. I think Griekspoor is the much better player as far as I'm concerned. He's been in good form on hardcourt, but his draw is much easier than Borges. But you're looking at Baena, who's a 2-time, or I should say he's made the finals 2 straight years. And now the favorite in the event has to maybe beat him in the quarterfinals. Not a fan of the draw at all. I think that Griekspoor's draw is much better by comparison. Griekspoor has a bye in the first round, then either Busta or a wild card entry, and then he has what could be Kotov or Bellucci in the quarters. So I like Griekspoor's draw a lot more than Borges. I think that Griekspoor at 6-1 is worth something. He's a solid clay player as well. You might remember he almost beat Zverev in the French Open, and then he choked away a 2-break lead in the 5th set. But Griekspoor is good on clay. He's played well in the hardcourt slate as he was able to beat Zverev a couple times. Or he ended up beating Zverev, he ended up beating Medvedev. He had a couple of impressive wins on hardcourt. I like the draw, though, for Griekspoor. Out of the 2 favorites at 6-1, I prefer Griekspoor a lot more. And Busta, we've seen recently in the Challenger slate and qualifying, really not look that great. So Busta, I'm not saying is washed by any means, but I feel like that's more of, I'd say, a name bias than an actual substance bias right now. Give me Griekspoor at 6-1 as my first choice here for the outrights. And now moving on to the next outright, I am going to go with another short option guy. I skipped Sonego. Wasn't really interested in the draw for Sonego. I think it's okay. Capriva, though, just won a clay challenger, so not exactly the easiest draw there for the second round, but he's in the same quarter as Darderi, which could be a bit tricky, as Darderi has been in good form on the challenger circuit, too. Not really a big fan of the Sonego draw, so I ended up passing on him. Plus, we know that he can be pretty volatile, so I am going to pass on Sonego, but I am going to go with Mueller at 8-1. Like the overall form he's been in so far this season, the draw's pretty good. Does have a bye in the first round in either Vukic or Delian, but he's in the same quarter as Munar, which I think is manageable. But I mentioned before that Mueller did reach the final in this event 2 years ago. So I know that Mueller can handle the courts here in Marrakech, and I do think he'll look sharp. He made the final in a clay event, did lose to Baez. I think it was in Rio. And then we saw him win a hardcourt title earlier this year. So Mueller's been in great form so far this season. I think 8-1 is a good price for a guy that was a finalist here a couple years ago. But when you've made 2 ATP finals this year and you've already won a title, I like your form. And I feel like, once again, with him being a pretty underrated clay player, I think he's got some value with that draw at 8-1. So it'll be my second choice there. For the third choice, I am going to pass on Sonego, but I am going to go with Darderi. I'll go with the fellow countryman here. I think that the price is just better at 12-1. We know Darderi is a clay specialist, did win his first ever clay event on the ATP Tour. Has really not been that good since, but he has been better on the challenger circuit recently. And I do think that his draw is not bad. Has Boyer in the first round, then Gaston, who can be a bit streaky in the second round. But Sonego, I do think, can be very, very volatile. We know the shot selection can be questionable. And I do think that Darderi, for being a clay guy in good form, I like 12-1. I think it's a good price. Did lose to, I think it was Capriva in the final of the challenger event about, I think that was actually this morning. But Darderi's been in good form on the clay challenger circuit. I think that'll translate well here into these matches. Give me Darderi at 12-1 as my first somewhat long shot. And last but not least, I have to do it. Give me Baena at 14-1. I think 14-1 for a back-to-back finalist and a former champion is insane odds. He's minus 7.5 games in the first match against a wild card from Morocco. So he has basically a bye in the first round. Altmaier could be tricky in the second round. He's a good clay player, but Baena has constantly been successful on these courts, and he has been a really, really dangerous opponent on these courts. So I like 14-1. I think his draw is pretty good. He's in the bottom half of the draw. Does have a potential matchup maybe against Mueller not Mueller. Sorry. He does have a potential matchup against Borges in the quarters, which doesn't really scare me that much. Borges, I think, is fine. But I feel like Borges has a little bit of a certain, I don't want to say reputation, but he has a certain amount of success on clay, which is a bit skewed because he did beat Nadal in the clay final last year, where Nadal was beating a bunch of unknowns right before he retired. So I do think that Borges is fine on clay. I don't think he's a great clay player, but Baena on these courts in Marrakech has been very, very dangerous. I'll take him as well at 14-1. So once again, my plays here for Marrakech, I am going to go with Griekspoor at 6-1, Mueller at 8-1, Darderi at 12-1, and Baena at 14-1. Moving on to the last outright that we're going to talk about for the week, you do have Houston. So you do have a U.S. clay event. You could argue that it's not real clay, and the surface is actually pretty awful, to be honest here, but either way, the recent winners have been dominated by good servers. You have Shelton, who won last year. You have Tiafoe, who won the year prior, and Opelka, who beat Isner in the final the year prior. So once again, Shelton, Tiafoe, and Opelka, not real clay. You get my point here. If you serve well, you do well here in Houston, but it's definitely not the same caliber of clay as Bucharest and Marrakech. That's kind of my point. Now, for the actual favorites here, a couple of pretty short favorites on the, I'd say, board. You have Paul at 3-1 as the favorite. You have Tiafoe, defending champion, or I should say, former champion, and he, once again, to get into the Tiafoe history, he did end up making the final in back-to-back years. So, once again, defending runner-up former champion is what I meant to say. But for Tiafoe, he's at 550. You have Nakashima at 7-1. Echeverry, former finalist, at 8-1. You have Mickelson at 11-1. Tien at 14-1. Tabilo at 14-1. Thompson at 16-1. You have Nishikori at 25-1. Galan at 25-1. Garin at 25-1. You have Kovacevic at 25 to 1, Hoffman at 30 to 1, McDonald at 35 to 1. You kind of get the point. So, for the actual outrights here, mentioning the favorites first, Paul's draw, I think, is actually really favorable. As a buy in the first round, then Garin or a Richard. Garin's not nearly the guy that he used to be based on his overall, I'd say, fitness and his overall durability. So Garin might look dangerous on paper. He is a wild card entry, so it wasn't like he was even initially in the draw. So I think you're looking at Garin as being a guy who basically got invited to be here based on the past, but he has really not been worth a damn for the last couple of years. I think that's a pretty reasonable path or draw for Paul in the second round. You have Thompson, Quinn, or Duckworth, three guys not known for their clay skills, and I do think you're looking at a pretty good path for Paul to get into the semis. Now, his half does feature Tabilo and Echeverry. I think Paul, though, is once again a pretty solid clay player, and I do think that his path is pretty good. So give me Paul as my first choice here at 3 to 1. I'm not happy about it to take a guy at 3 to 1 as my favorite pick here, but I like the draw too much. I think there is some value there. And I mentioned before, the Americans have done quite well for the actual outrights in this event in the past. You have had an American champion in 3 straight years, so give me Paul here at 3 to 1 to keep that tradition rolling. Moving on to the next favorite, you have Tiafoe at 550. Like Paul, I like his draw a lot. Now, he has a buy in the first round, then either Momo or Walton in the second round, two guys not known for the clay skills. You have Mickelson against Tien in the first round, which is a lot of fun. Then you have Hoffman and Moreno. So I think Tiafoe, once again, is a very favorable draw into the semis, and you're looking at a spot where I'd say I'm not really scared of anybody in the third quarter. You have Nakashima, who's not really good on clay, but he has a good serve, so maybe he can do something here. You have Nishikori, who never know if he's actually going to stay healthy for the entire event. Eubank, Sichikata, you get the drill. So based on the overall draw, as much as I despise betting on the guy, I think 550 is worth something for Tiafoe. The draw is good, and he once again has made the final in back-to-back iterations of the event. He's a former champion. Give me Tiafoe, as much as it pains me, at plus 550. To be fair, this is in America. We know Tiafoe is a lot better in America than he is in other parts of the world. And Tiafoe at 550 with this draw, I think is worth something. I'll take him at the price of 550. For the last one, I am going to go with a longer shot, a guy that has been good on clay in the past, and I think his draw is manageable. I am going to go with Tabilo at 14 to 1. I think Tabilo has been a guy who we ended up backing a lot last year, early on, and we made some money, but he's had a really bad start to this season. He was playing a bit better, though, over the last couple of weeks. So initially, he was basically in auto-fade territory. He started to climb out of it, and I thought he actually looked okay over the last couple of events, but I do think he'll look a little bit sharper on clay. Pretty good serve. I think the lefty game can cause some opponents problems, but 14 to 1 for his overall draw, I think is pretty good. Has a matchup against potentially Daniel in the second round. Echeverry maybe in the quarters, but Echeverry, we know, can potentially fall short at times. Tabilo Echeverry could be interesting, but I find it weird that Echeverry is at 8 to 1 and Tabilo's at 14 to 1. I don't agree with that pricing. Echeverry, as a reminder, has never won an ATP title in his entire career. I like Echeverry, made the final here a couple years ago, but he's never won a title in his career, and he's basically half the price of Tabilo. I think that pricing is wrong. I think Tabilo has value. I'll go with him at 14 to 1 as well for the last option in Houston. So once again, I didn't really go for any super long shots. Houston is, as far as I'm concerned, BS clay. It's not really clay. It's why you get a bunch of good servers winning. I'm not really going to bother with a couple of serious long shots. I wasn't interested. I do think that one of the favorites will win the event. But for the actual value, I did find a relative long shot here with Tabilo, and that's kind of where I'm going to max out my branching out, so to speak, for the event. So once again, my outright picks here for the 3 events that upcoming week here in Bucharest. I am going to go as my outright picks. I'm going to go with Baez at 5 to 1, Martinez at 10 to 1, Comasanya at 18 to 1, and De Zoomer at 28 to 1. For Houston, I am going to go with Paul at 3 to 1, Tiafoe at 550, and Tabilo at 14 to 1. And for Marrakech, I am going to go with Griekspoor at 6 to 1, Muller at 8 to 1, Darderi at 12 to 1, and Baena at 14 to 1. Yes, I know I did pick a lot of outright options, but a reminder, when you are in the clay circuit and you don't have any elite top tier guys playing, you can expect the unexpected. You can definitely expect to see a Cinderella make a deep run. It happens all the time, and as a result, I am going to go with a decent amount of outrights because I do think that it's going to increase my chances of maybe hitting a very good price for one of these long shot options. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for the actual preview of the 3 events. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks of the first round of these events. Before we do that, though, remember once again that we are brought to you by our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy, because they have a great underdog pick'em. You can play once again any sport and win 100 times your money. You can also mix and match NBA, NHL. You can do college basketball as well for the Final Four. You can also do tennis, obviously, and esports. Mix and match whatever you want with 100 times your money. And a reminder, you don't want to sign up for a new account with Underdog. Use the promo code SGPN. Especially the first time deposit offer up to 1K bonus cash on fantasy. Promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Rhythm because they are the home for AI picks and props. They're also off to a great start in March Madness. You can build your own model. You can also copy once again more from the leaderboard. A couple ways to actually use their AI picks, but they've been doing a great job so far. If you want to build one yourself, you can do so. It's easy and profitable to do so. You also have models in different sports, NBA, golf, coming soon MLB. They also have a free 7-day trial, so if you want to try it out for free for a week, use the link sportsgamblingpockets.com's room, sportsgamblingpockets.com, so RATHMM. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Cam Podcast. Finished breaking down the outrights for the 3 events. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks. For the lock, I am going to go with a matchup that's kind of under the radar, but I do like it quite a bit. It's a matchup between Kopriva and Gojo, and I am going to go with Kopriva money line at -120. Kopriva is on a bit of a heater. Did win the Clay Challenger event this past week. He now has 5 career Clay Challenger titles. He's a pretty underrated clay player. Now, Gojo, on the other hand, is more of a hard court guy, as he made a relatively respectable run in the U.S. Open a couple years ago, but he has never won a Clay Challenger title, not really known for being a good clay player. On top of that, he barely plays clay. He's played 3 clay matches since May 2023. So you have a champion this past weekend in a clay event who has 5 career clay titles on the Challenger circuit against a guy that's played 3 total clay matches in basically 2 years, and he's not really known for being a good clay player at all. I see a good matchup here for Kopriva. You have to wonder about fatigue, but there is a day off, though, obviously. So I do think you're looking at a spot where he can get the job done here. I think it's a good matchup for him. And Kopriva, I do think, is objectively speaking a pretty underrated clay player. But you're looking at 2 guys that you could argue are challenger caliber in the first round. And you're looking at a spot where he does have a day off, does not play tomorrow. So it actually will be taking place on Tuesday. I think he'll have enough energy to bounce back and to recover physically from winning that 3-setter against Darderi in the final. But just won a title in Napoli. He's playing good tennis, and I do think that you are looking at a good spot for Kopriva to get the job done here at a pretty affordable price. We saw Gojo play in Napoli as well, went through qualifying, then lost to Wawrinka 6-2, 6-3. So they were in the same event in the Challenger circuit this past week. Kopriva won the event, and Gojo lost his first match. So I like the overall path here and the overall, once again, price here for Kopriva. I'll go with him on the money line at -120 as my lock. For my dog, I am going to go to Bucharest, actually. I am going to go to the matchup between a relative unknown in Giannou. I'm going to go with his match against Basaviretti. I'm going to fade Basaviretti, actually. I'm going to go with Giannou on the money line at +125. Now, Giannou, as a Romanian, does have home crowd advantage, and I do think that's going to help him out in this one. But I do want to point out that Giannou has been active in the Challenger circuit on clay. He's already played 9 clay matches this year. He's 5-4. Not really a great player by any means, but I like the overall spot with him being in his home country and with him playing a lot of clay events. The problem here for Basaviretti is that he really has no clay experience at all, and that's why I'm going to fade him. We know Americans as a whole have been very fadeable over the years on clay, and Basaviretti has really no clay experience at all. Basaviretti's last clay match in his career was April 2022. He has basically not played a clay match in 3 straight years. Now, I love Basaviretti as a player. I think he's a solid guy who can be very dangerous to win a couple of ATP titles in the future on hard court. But clay is definitely not his bread and butter. I think he's going to look a little bit underwhelming, and I think he's going to struggle adjusting to the actual environment here in Romania on clay. But if you want to give me a guy who has not played a clay match in basically 3 years against a guy in his home country, and I can get the dog here at +125. I like the price. I understand Giannou is not nearly as good of a player as Basaviretti in general, but based on the lack of court familiarity and based on the lack of experience on clay that Basaviretti has, I think it's going to hurt him. I think Basaviretti is a guy that can be viewed highly because of what he's done earlier this year. forgetting how underwhelming or how, I'd say, unproven he is on clay. So I'm going to fade him. I'll go with the dog here. Give me Giannou on the money line here at plus 125. So once again, the lock and dog plays for the show. The lock's going to be on Capriva on the money line of minus 120. For the dog, I am going to go with Giannou money line against Bassaretti at plus 125. That's going to wrap it up for this episode. Back once again for the quarterfinals in Bucharest and in Marrakech. We might do Houston. The problem is, once again, with the American slate, you might get some late matches. So we might end up having to punt on Houston. So we definitely will be back for the quarters in Bucharest and in Marrakech, maybe for Houston. But of course, once again, we'll be back at some point later on in the week. Until then, find me on Twitter, Reichel Radio. You can find me on the NBA show. Find me on the MLB show as well. Until next time, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.